Whenever you guys are ready. All right. All right, folks, good afternoon. I want to start off our roundtable today. Thank you very much for being here today. It's wonderful seeing everyone here in the room, and for those of you out in the cyberland, thank you for joining us. As usual, each month we have a great group of people coming together. We usually need every minute of our 2 hours to be here, so let me just jump right into things by first telling you the most obvious thing, and that is I am not Tim Carpenter, nor I think can anyone replace Tim Carpenter, but unfortunately, Tim, we're sad to see that you're not here today, but we will move on without you, but I'm sure you're there watching every step of the way we're making here. My name is Steve Schaff. I am the Vice Chair Emeritus of the Advisory Board of Progressive Democrats of America. I have the honor today to help facilitate today's roundtable. So let's start off very quickly because we want to be very careful of Keith Ellison's time. There's a number of votes going on. So before we do our introductions, let me just get right into introducing Mr. Ellison, who's been a wonderful supporter of PDA and a great collaborator and someone who has been very important, pushing a lot of the issues that we need to really amplify. And those of you in this room obviously know how to do that. So Mr. Ellison, thank you very much for being here. It's all yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And let me just give a very strong thanks to everyone with the Progressive Democrats of America. You guys are awesome. And I just want to say, as strenuously and passionately as I can, your presence on this Hill is essential. You must be here. You must come here. You must knock on the doors and talk to these members of Congress about the pressing issues that are of utmost importance to the American people. And of course, you know, with regard to my brother Tim Carpenter, Tim, we can never repay you for all you've done for everyone, but we can say thank you. And so we say thank you in a heartfelt way. I want to talk about the Robin Hood tax, the Inclusive Prosperity Act, but if you will allow me, I also want to just make one other philosophical point. The people's government of that money. And so while great fortunes are being amassed at various parts of our country, and while the 1%'s getting more money, and while they're trying to create tax and trade and all kinds of policies to even do more, you know, our government goes starving and they even shut it down. And so I got some attention from the right-wing press when I said it's not that Americans don't have money, it's just that the government doesn't have any. They kind of made hay out of that. I'm not ashamed of saying that. I'll say it again. And I hope they, I hope they heard me. Anyway, now let's talk about what we're here to talk about. I have good news for you. Good news is that we have now 18 co-sponsors of the Inclusive Prosperity Act. The Financial Transaction Tax Bill we just added John Sarbanes as a co-sponsor. We had an enormous group organized by nurses and others, and I'm sure in PDA and others, you guys are there, to come together and lobby Congress to get people on this bill. And I think that the work that you guys did on that was awesome. As I said, you've got to show up, and you are showing up, and I'm so proud of that. This is a bill, just a common sense bill. It was law. Up until 1966, we had a transactions tax. Numerous countries around the world have a transactions tax. And after the American people bailed out Wall Street, it makes only sense that Wall Street would try to help the American people as we provide the best environment in the world for them to make money in through the United States government. And so this transactions tax, as we are now entering into real discussions about budget issues, the Inclusive Prosperity Act becomes a good way to fund the needs of our government. $350 billion some dollars to be collected from this tax every year, which literally we wouldn't be cutting Head Start, WIC. We wouldn't be cutting basic research to combat Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. We would be funding the needs of the American people. We wouldn't have bridges falling down as they did in my district 5 years ago and water mains bursting, and we would have 21st century infrastructure if we could get these folks to do their good part. So the bill is moving. Just to recap everybody, a very tiny tax, sales tax on stock trades, derivatives, and bonds, and would do a lot of good. Wouldn't hurt you with your 401k, but would slow down the churning. And very expert watchers of Wall Street all agree that that this algorithmic based trading creates flash crashes and other sort of anomalies which are bad for our country. So that's going on, and thank you for consistently asking me about the Inclusive Prosperity Act, because we're in this thing for the long haul, right? It's not like we introduce a bill and, that was then, no. We're going to stick with it, we're going to stay with it, and we're going to keep with it. Let me also, if I may, turn to another critical topic that's in front of us right now, and that is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and along with it, something called Fast Track Authority or Trade Promotion Authority. This is an issue that every progressive in America, every person, even conservatives, better be worried about. This is another trade deal, folks. One not unlike NAFTA, maybe even only worse, except for the Trans-Pacific Partnership includes more countries and covers more sectors of the economy than NAFTA, which is why some people refer to it as NAFTA on steroids. And it affects nearly every industry in the United States. But it's not just labor and employment that it affects. It also has to do, could potentially ban Buy America provisions. It also has something referred to as one-point inspection, which means that if after the food that somebody wants to export to the United States is inspected in the home country, then it is, for all intents and purposes, inspected till it lands on your plate. That means, so if you get a country like Vietnam, which has had food safety issues, and their food they're exporting here has been stopped like over 200 times, you can imagine that could be a real problem. Oh, and by the way, it would require that higher drug prices be assessed on countries that the United States sends drugs to. They'd have to pay U.S. drug prices. Now, how would people in the world who need HIV, antiretroviral drugs, be able to afford them? We've been through this, and it was wrong and immoral, and we did it, and we stopped it. Now we're going to have to stop it all over again if this thing passes through. Let's just prevent it from being passed. And then the other companion of the TPP is Trade Promotion Authority. Now Congress is asked to waive its constitutional right to amend the bill. I mean, how in the world can a deliberative body tasked with formulating the best legislation that we can give up its right to amend the bill? It would just be an up or down vote. And it would be shortly after the Trans-Pacific Partnership bill was introduced. I'm a hard no on it. And I'm hoping that everybody in the PDA family is too, and tell the story, because you run into people and they don't know about TPP. And it's not because they're not sharp, it's because it's not even public. Some of you might very, correctly say, hey, Keith, could you send me a copy of the Trans-Pacific Partnership bill? And I'd have to tell you, no, I cannot. I haven't seen it. Yet 600 business and industry people have seen it. And they're required not to tell anybody what they've seen. But if I want to see it, maybe I can go see a few pages of it on a certain chapter or title. If it's so good, how come it's not a public process? We should not pass Trade Promotion Authority, and we should be very, very suspicious of TPP. And I guarantee you one thing, if we start raising issues around TPP, they're going to have to back off because it's not defensible. It's not defensible. It is an agreement between elites so that they can make more money And here's a little stat that you may make your eyebrows raise a little bit. In the 2 decades since NAFTA, which we were promised would be this big job engine, in the 2 decades since NAFTA, over 62% of organized workers negotiating for better pay have received threats of offshoring from their employers. Okay, is it okay if I say it again? In the 2 decades since NAFTA, over 62% of organized workers negotiating for better pay have received threats of offshoring from their employers. So basically what NAFTA allows domestic employers to do is to press down wages and conditions for American workers. Oh, you want more pay? Oh, that's interesting. Because I know some people who work for 10% of what you get paid, and they don't complain. So I think you better shut up and be glad you have any job. That's the message, right? So look, we can't tolerate this. We won't tolerate this, but we've got to organize against it. I just want to wrap up by saying this very quick thing. So I'm very honored to be co-chair of the Progressive Caucus. Me and Raul Grijalva lead the organization, but we have a host of awesome, out of control, great public servants, including folks you're going to hear from today, like my good buddy Alan Grayson, Barbara Lee, and others. And all I want to say is that that we can't do anything by ourselves. The power's not in the politician's hand. The power's in the people's hand. The power is spread out across America with all these passionate people. And guess what? They're all colors. They're white, they're black, they're Latino, they're Asian, they're Native. They're all ages. Some are 80, some of them are 8, some are 18. And guess what? Some are civilian, some are in the military. Some of them are straight, some of them are gay, some of them are bisexual, some are transgender. They are the rich, beautiful diversity that is this country, but they're unified in one thing: their belief that in America that we should have liberty and justice for all. They're unified in that way, which is the most important way. But freedom isn't free, and if you want to make this country the country that it can be and should be, you're going to have to roll up your sleeves, put your shoulder to the wheel, and have some real grit. Because we got a lot of smart people who understand the problem. What we need is some courageous people who are going to fight for a good solution. And I know that's who we're surrounded by today, and that's what Tim Carpenter represents in my mind. So thanks for listening, you guys. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Well said. And I don't have to emphasize to you that we have some real heroes on the Hill, and we really need to support them so that their voices can get even louder than they are now. We have time just for maybe one or two very quick questions or comments, and then we'll let the representative go on to, I'm sure, a very busy day. Steve.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Ellison. My question is, I've been spending the last week on protecting the vote in Virginia, where the election was just certified yesterday. And my concern in that regard is the status of two things in Congress. One, John Lewis's bill, H.R. 12, and the Voting Rights Amendment. And I would like you, if you can, to update us on that. Thanks.
Let me get there quick. I know I was supposed to mention the Voting Rights Act, but I tried to quicken up.
So much to talk about.
There's so much to talk about. Okay, so these folks who want to pass laws that basically prioritize profit over people and do a whole bunch of other stuff, you know, take women's right to control their medical health and their decision making, all those folks who represent that point of view, they know they cannot win the debate. So they're just trying to take people's right to vote away. And so John Lewis's bill, John is trying to negotiate. So if you're talking about the one to restore to correct the problem the Supreme Court created, that particular bill, he's working. You know, a lot of Republicans voted for it, like over 300 of them voted to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act back in 2006. And so, you know, if they were for it then, they should be still for it. And so he's working hard on that. Now, it's also important to remember that as soon as the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, a lot of legislatures controlled by right-wing Republicans immediately introduced these photo ID bills. Now, I think we should challenge these photo ID bills in court because there's no reason for any of them, and none of them have any merit at all. And don't be fooled. Saying that they're going to give you a free ID is no solution at all. It's just wrong. But you should know something. In Minnesota, we had one of these things on the ballot, and we defeated it. And the way we did it is first we thought we could defeat it. We didn't calculate the odds. We just said it was wrong, so we're going to fight it. So and guess what? We beat it. Here's how we beat it. When we would call people, once we told them that it was going to be expensive, once we told them that it was going to exclude veterans and seniors, once we told them it was going to be exclude people, once we told them the facts, people said, oh, well, I'm not voting for that. Because they know it. They poll tested these photo IDs. They know it has a level of gut level appeal because it's just, oh, well, I showed my ID at the grocery store, so why not? Well, you know what? That is not what this is about. This is about voter suppression, pure and simple. Don't back down. Let's fight back. So I wish I could go into more time, but you know we're limited. So sorry about that.
Joseph had his hand up. So one more question from Joseph and real quick from Rick.
Okay.
We have one mic.
This is more a comment than a question. When we talk about TPP, the debate really has failed to look at its strategic role. This is in large measure about containing China, excluding them, creating what they call a docking agreement that would force China to come in on our terms if and when it ever does, and to appreciate that it's linked with the negotiation of the EU-US free trade agreement. And the idea is to put the United States at the head of the world's two largest free trading agreements, about 70% of world trade, as a way both to leverage China and to have more resources for its militarism, which is already out of control. So I think this is a part of the TPP debate that we have to look at and not look at it as if it is not impacting the rest of the world.
Well, I do appreciate you broadening the conversation. I think it's important to put that out there, but there's got to be a better way, right? Because if that's their strategic goal is to try to manage China, first we should question whether this is the right way to manage China. And then we should ask, why should we sacrifice the best interests of the American people to do that? In fact, why are the people who say that we're doing this to manage China are saying they're doing it for the benefit of the American people at the expense of the American people? So that's kind of paradoxical, but thank you for broadening the conversation. I am aware of those considerations. And in terms of the Atlantic Free Trade Agreement, Europe actually has some pretty good stuff for the environment and workers and stuff like that. Are we then going to import the stuff we do here, which is not that hot for workers and the environment? I don't know. I hope not.
Well, actually, we wanted to have Emily give us an update while you're still here about the letter jobs. So we're going to move on to the next topic real quick before Mr. Allison has to leave. And as you all know, PDA outreach is not just here on the Hill. We are very active out in districts, and one way we do that is these very powerful letter drops we're doing. This month alone, over 200 drops are going to be happening. So I'm going to introduce you to right now Emily Worth, who's working with us in collaboration with the Food and Water Watch partners over here in D.C., and she'll give you an update on this upcoming letter drop. Emily?
Great. Thank you so much. I want to thank Tim Carpenter and Russell Green for asking me to speak today about this letter drop. As many of you are aware, there's been a really rapid expansion of the use of fracking to extract oil and gas across the United States over the past decade. And just to quickly define it, with fracking, you drill a well vertically into the ground. And what they've done now is there's horizontal rock layers that you drill horizontally into and then inject millions of gallons of water combined with chemicals, some of which are toxic, and sand underground at high pressure to break apart the rock, which allows the oil and gas to be released. And so we believe there are about 25,000 new wells being drilled and fracked each year right now. So just as an overview, fracking takes a huge toll on affected communities. It generates massive volumes of toxic waste that can't be safely disposed of. It creates hazardous air pollution problems that cause health problems for people in the nearby communities, and it poses long-term risks to our vital drinking water sources. It also threatens to lock us into catastrophic climate change, which I think is at the forefront of all of our minds this week after the terrible storm in the Philippines. And so just much of the organizing and work that people are doing against fracking is happening at the local level and at the state level in their communities. And this just last week, we had some victories on this local organizing in Colorado, where communities of Fort Collins, Boulder, and Lafayette all passed measures on the ballot that will keep fracking from coming to their communities for at least 5 years. And so that was really great. But the reason that this organizing is happening at the state and local level is that the oil and gas industry is exempt from many provisions of our major federal environmental laws. And so the industry is allowed to do things essentially that would otherwise be illegal if they had to abide by these federal laws. And what we find is that the state rules in many states are lax, and they are not able to be adequately enforced because of the lack of funding for inspectors at the local level. And there's also a revolving door between state regulators and the oil and gas industry, which causes real problems when it comes to safeguarding public health and the environment. And so that brings me to the letter drop this week. This week, the letter is promoting 4 pieces of legislation that we're calling on members of Congress to support that would be essentially reveal oil and gas industry exemptions from key environmental laws. And they would require the oil and gas industry to be held accountable the way that other industries are to these environmental bills. And so I'll briefly walk you through these 4 bills. The FRAC Act is the first. This would make fracking subject to the Safe Drinking Water Act. It was, just as a point of background, it was exempt from this in the 2005 Energy Policy Act under the Bush-Cheney administration, which is also referred to as the Halliburton loophole. And it would require the chemicals that are used in fracking to be disclosed. The second is the BREATHE Act. This would remove the exemptions of oil and gas industry exploration and production activities from the Clean Air Act aggregation requirement. In other words, they would be required to add up all of the air pollution hazards from individual wells and count those together for the air pollution problems that they are causing. The third is the Fresher Act. This would eliminate the exemption from permitting requirements for stormwater runoff in the Clean Water Act, another issue. It would make the oil and gas industry follow the same rules for getting a permit for stormwater runoff and being held responsible for that other industries experience. And it would also conduct a study so that we better understand these issues with stormwater runoff. The fourth is the Cleaner Act, and this is the final one. This eliminates a 33-year-old loophole for the oil and gas industry to the Resources Conservation and Recovery Act that requires the oil and gas industry to abide by regulations for the safe disposal of solid waste and hazardous materials. And so, in other words, the waste that's being produced, we believe, should be classified as hazardous waste and therefore subject to the same rules that other hazardous waste are, but currently it's not. And these new technologies that are used produce millions and millions and billions, really, of gallons of wastewater that there's really no safe way to dispose of. So in summary, it's really critical that you participate in this letter drop, that these letters are dropped off to your members of Congress. And really, this is nothing radical. This is saying the oil and gas industry should be held accountable to our landmark environmental laws. So that's the letter drop. I wanted to mention one more bill that I think is really important, if I could. H.R. 2728 is a bill that could come up for a vote on the full House floor as early as next week. And it seeks to prohibit the Department of Interior from enforcing its own rules for hydraulic fracturing in a state that also has rules for this process. So basically, this is taking away the right for the federal government to regulate this activity on federal lands in states that have rules. And what we know is that this is being proposed. The industry, I'm sure, is behind this because they want, if states' laws are weaker than what the federal rules that are being proposed right now and have just been modified, they don't want to have to follow the federal government's rules. And this is a real problem. And I think this comes from a tremendous organizing effort that took place over the summer. And it's exactly what Representative Ellison was just referring to, where people across the country came together and submitted more than 1 million comments to members of Congress calling for stronger rules or for no drilling or fracking on our federal lands. These are cherished federal lands, our national forests, lands near our national parks. And this bill is a direct response, in my opinion, to this incredible organizing where there was a huge public outpouring, more than we've ever seen on this issue before. And so I think it's essential, as you're educating members of Congress, to urge them to please vote no on this bill. And like I said, it could come up for a full House vote next week. It's already passed out of committee. So thank you so much for your time.
Great. All right. Thank you, Emily. Okay. Well, you must do your duty, and thank you very much for coming here today. Appreciate all your support. Congressman Keith Ellison, a real progressive champion. Thank you very much for coming. Okay. All right, folks. Well, in deference to Mr. Ellison's time, I wanted to hold off introductions. I want to just take a real quick moment to start introductions now, because I want to make sure that we acknowledge those that are in the room. You are our partners. You've made the time to be here. There's a lot of great thinkers and collaborators here. So if we can be very quick about this, if you could introduce yourself and the organization you're with, and then pass on the microphone. Thank you.
I'm Ken Paris. I'm Chief Economist for the Communications Workers of America.
I'm Rick Sumner with Progressive Democrats of America. Spend a lot of time dropping letters here on the Hill every week.
I'm Mike Hirsch, National Staff of Progressive Democrats of America.
David Rabin, Institute for Universal Health Care. Strong supporter of H.R. 676 and an improved Medicare.
Len Mel, a campaign for full employment and PDA.
Medea Benjamin, Code Pink and PDA.
I'm Gary Feld. I'm Steve Schaff's assistant.
James Handley, Carbon Tech Center and PDA.
Miriam Pemberton, Institute for Policy Studies.
Hi, Emily Worth with Food and Water Watch.
Stephen Spitz, PDA.
Ron Fisher, We the People Now. I have a strategic plan, wethepeoplenow.org.
Back here. My name is Aaron Kasukis with Public Citizens Global Trade Watch.
My name is Danny Richter with the Citizens Climate Lobby.
I'm Francesca Buzzi with Food and Water Watch.
Liz Schuster with Food and Water Watch.
Cole Stangler from In These Times.
Mark Levin from PDA.
Ann Creeder from the Peace Alliance Campaign for a Department of Peace Building.
I'm Alex Lawson with Social Security Works.
Connor Boylan, Progressive Democrats of America.
All right, thank you very much, folks. Again, I appreciate your being here. You are a great representative group of folks that are trying to make the world a little bit better. We want to continue on. Actually, before we continue on, let me make a real quick program note here. Alex Lawson with Social Security Works will be speaking in a few minutes, but also one of the tasks that he has on his agenda today is to deliver over 700,000 signatures that will help save Social Security. So anyone here who's available and is willing to join Alex to help him present this to Congressmember Ryan's office, we certainly encourage you to stick around and take that walk with Alex, another good partner of ours. So let's continue on with the discussion regarding the Robin Hood tax, or as it's officially known in the Inclusive Prosperity Act. And next on our agenda would be Joseph Gerson of the American Friends Service Committee. Joseph?
Actually, I'm not talking about the Robin Hood tax. I'm talking about the continuing nuclear dangers, nuclear weapons dangers. And let me begin by saying that looking around the room here, we have some people who have enough gray hair to remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, the dangers of the Reagan era, and some people who were part of a generation who really haven't dealt with nuclear issues. And just to appreciate that the U.S. strategic arsenal, the average power of about 7,000 of our nuclear weapons, about 20 times the size of the Hiroshima A-bomb. And to appreciate as well that on more than 30 occasions since Nagasaki, the United States has prepared and threatened to initiate nuclear war during international crises and wars. In fact, every other nuclear power in the world has made such threats at least once. I think we want to appreciate President Obama's speech in Prague but the reality is that there's been very little follow-through, almost none. And to appreciate that the nuclear danger didn't end with the end of the Cold War. So just to repeat real quickly, we had with the 91 Gulf War, U.S. threats to initiate nuclear war against Iraq. During the Clinton administration, there were threats against Libya and Iraq, also North Korea in 1994. The second Bush administration, threats against Iraq, Iran, and Rumsfeld made a threat against Afghanistan. And even President Obama not only has had all options on the table in relationship to Iran, but during last March's crisis with North Korea, the United States flew simulated nuclear attacks against North Korea with B-2 and B-52 bombers. So it's very real. To appreciate the dangers here, the International Physicians for Prevention of Nuclear War in a study have said that even a small, quote-unquote, small exchange of about 100 Indian and Pakistani bombs would result minimally in the deaths of 1.5 billion people, not only those in the immediate blast areas, but with the fallout and the dust and everything coming up, the smoke would basically create cloud cover that would bring on a freeze, which would then result in famine around much of the world. The more recent studies indicate this is probably 2.5 billion people. The Red Cross has said, International Red Cross has said, that in the context of nuclear war, there's no way that they can provide adequate support. To appreciate the current moment, there was an article in, I think, Tuesday's China Daily. I know everybody here is an absolutely loyal reader of the China Daily. But it quoted Secretary of Defense Hagel in terms of the dangers of possible U.S.-Chinese war. Quoting from the article, it says, Defense Secretary Hagel on Tuesday said that regional tensions and conflicts in Asia-Pacific, the Middle East, and elsewhere continue to have the potential to erupt into larger-scale conflicts, drawing in the U.S., China, and Russia. And people should look particularly at names you've never heard of, the Diaoyu Senkaku Islands, uninhabited islands contested between Japan and China, and in the South China Sea. And to appreciate that just over a year ago, we almost went to war over those islands. Japan and China, very intense conflict, increasingly militarizing it, and both the U.S. Congress and the Obama administration said that should it come to war, the United States would come in on Japan's side. We're now in a situation where Japan is moving to fly drones over those islands, and the Chinese have said if they shoot their because the Chinese going to put the drones over there. If the Japanese shoot them down, that's an act of war, and then we're on. Also, just to appreciate, I spoke at the United Nations high-level meeting on nuclear disarmament in September. This was heads of state, foreign ministers, and ambassadors from around the world. And little reported in the United States is just how isolated the United States is and just how little we're doing. So in that context, ironically, almost the majority of the nations identified with the resolutions put forward by the non-aligned movement. The greatest concerns that were raised were the failure of the United States to implement its part of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is to move toward negotiations for the comprehensive abolition of nuclear weapons. And, if you will, more urgently, more recently, the failure to convene or co-convene the Conference for a Middle East Nuclear Weapons and Weapons of Mass Destruction Free Zone in 2012. The United States made a commitment to do this during the NPT review in 2010, and the failure to implement it could lead to the absolute collapse of the NPT. And if that goes, you're going to see absolute global proliferation of nuclear weapons. I mean, two more analytical points and then elements that people can follow up on. We should appreciate that in part of the deal to win ratification of the New START treaty, and New START was only really important in terms of maintaining a system of verification with Russia. President Obama committed to massive increases in spending for both nuclear weapons and for their delivery systems. The New York Times estimates the cost at between $300 billion and $1 trillion. This is while we're shutting down hospitals, schools, WIC, all kinds of essential human needs, and of course making the world much more dangerous and encouraging other nations to follow suit. we're spending things for as well modernization of the B-61 bomb, which the Europeans want out, and there's actually legislation to get rid of it here. So these are all things I think are of great and immediate concern. If you look at what's going on in China, look what's going on in Japan, intense nationalism, the kind of environment in which political leaders themselves have to follow public opinion at times rather than lead it. And when you're in a crisis over something like the Diaoyu Sakako Islands, it's the kind of thing that can get out of hand, lead to war. And it's been compared to 1914, and we're just on the 100th anniversary of the beginning of the First World War. So what are some things that people can do to support here? I think one is to support the Holmes-Norton bill for abolition and economic conversion. And to think that we're not going to win it now, but as Bob Borisage says in his recent article, we need to be building the platform for the future. And I think getting behind that is one way to do that. I think we have to be pressing the Obama administration that it's absolutely necessary to move to convene the Middle East nuclear weapons and WMD free zone conference in Helsinki. This is of absolute urgent importance to kill the B-61. And following one of the things that took place, again not reported in the United States, as the General Assembly opened, they passed 2 resolutions of critical importance. In one, 125 nations, including Japan, which is under the U.S. nuclear umbrella, all voted that nuclear weapons should not be used under any condition at all. And this was followed by 2/3 of the world's nations voting that the negotiations for the complete elimination of nuclear weapons required by the NPT, required by the International Court of Justice, should begin in 2014. These are all things that we need to be putting on our agenda because what we're dealing with here is the survival of the human race. And we've got climate change and we have nuclear weapons. With the end of the Cold War, people forgot about it, thought the danger went away. The truth is it didn't. We need to be doing the education. We need to be doing the outreach. We need to be talking about the conversion. We need to be doing what's important if our children, grandchildren are to survive. Thank you.
Okay, Joe, can you give us a quick overview of your background?
My background. In 1964, I went to college thinking I wanted to be both a freedom rider and a diplomat. So I went to Georgetown, and one of my classmates was a guy named Bill Clinton. I decided I couldn't be a diplomat for a country that was fighting a war in Vietnam, and so I went into the civil rights movement and then the peace movement, and been doing that ever since. What more to say? We helped to launch the nuclear weapons freeze movement in basically 1979. In Boston, we had to fight a struggle against both Senator Kennedy and now Secretary of Defense Kerry, I'm sorry to say. They took the bait from Reagan, wanted to turn Boston into a nuclear weapons base. And we had the operations officer from the Atlantic Fleet, former operations officer, come up and give really important testimony about the Navy's history of nuclear weapons accidents. I've been working with Japanese and other Asian and European peace movements about forever. Work closely with A-bomb survivors, have brought delegations not only of Japanese A-bomb survivors, we have about 1 million here in the United States between our downwinders, just absolutely sacrificed to the pursuit of nuclear superiority. Atomic veterans who were purposely exposed to fallout so that the military could know how troops would respond in a condition of nuclear warfighting, and some of the people who work in the nuclear weapons plants. I do work, I've been doing exchanges with some figures in China on the board of the International Peace Bureau, so I keep busy.
And I also noticed that you're an author of Empire and the Bomb. Looks very interesting. A little scary, but interesting.
Just to say this is basically a history of the U.S. use of nuclear weapons, beginning with Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but then moving through the Bush administration and providing the really sorry, unhappy, frightening detail of more than 30 occasions when our government prepared and threatened to initiate nuclear war. When you do this, it takes you into a very dark understanding of the nature of the state. But when a state is a global empire And when you have a military that's rolling your president, as it did in Afghanistan, you need to understand that this is the world we live in. And if we're going to change the world, we need to understand the world that we occupy.
All right. Thank you very much. I had to jump track slightly. I put you in the wrong category here. We're going to continue our conversation. And we have with us, with the Communication Workers of America, Ken Paris, who's the chief economist. And you'll be commenting on the Robin Hood tax, as well as TPP. Okay, all right, very good. They all sort of blend together after a while. Okay. All right, and you'll explain to us, I'm sure, why.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. A special hello to Tim. Thanks for the invite, and stay strong. We're with you there. Pardon?
Still have to keep it close.
Okay. Keep it close to the vest. Okay. Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's a so-called free trade agreement that really has 29 chapters, but only 5 of it deal with tariff issues that we think of in terms of trade. It is really a economic integration and deregulation agreement. Think about multinational corporations. They have global supply chains, global value chains. They have to deal with different regulations and laws in different countries. They don't like that because it gets in the way of their profits and their ability to make decisions about their own supply chains and where to place things and where not to place things. So what they want to do is, the term they use is harmonize regulations. They want to reduce regulations to the lowest common denominator so that they have one set of rules and they can have the ability to do whatever they want and breeze through the process. So don't think this is just in terms of trade. This is economic integration. It includes 12 countries that represents 38% of global economic activity. It includes what NAFTA had was Canada, the US, and Mexico. Add to that Peru, Chile, Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, Brunei, Vietnam, New Zealand, and Australia. I think that's 12. Don't ask me to repeat all that. So this is not just something that's isolated. It impacts almost every aspect of our lives. And I'll just go through a list of some of those. Jobs. We think of the loss of manufacturing jobs, but this Trans-Pacific Partnership also impacts services and public sector jobs. In terms of jobs and wages, we will be put in competition with Vietnam, a country that has a minimum wage that amounts to 28 cents an hour, compared to ours, $7.25. So you can see that pulls down our wages, especially if corporations can invest there with little risk, which is also another aspect of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Service sector jobs. This will allow or require that service sector companies that deliver services in different countries without any presence in the United States can bid for government contracts and services without any possibility of any obstacle to that. So service jobs will be at risk, especially call center jobs, which CWA is an important aspect too. Public sector jobs also, because procurement, like the Buy American Act, which was passed in the 1930s, so that government, the federal government and state governments too, will give preferences to American-made products, that will be prohibited by the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Say goodbye to Buy American and those type of things. Literally millions of jobs will be at risk because of this Trans-Pacific Partnership. Workers' rights. Congressman Ellison mentioned that after NAFTA, threats against workers increased directly. Threats of closures increased significantly because of the threat to relocate in different places. Kate Bronfenbrenner did a lot of work on the impacts of NAFTA on U.S. workers' rights. But it's also been reprehensible in terms of free trade agreements and workers' rights in other countries. We have workers' rights in Mexico, which our own State Department has shown to be eroded since NAFTA. Colombia, which had a labor action plan, this is still the most dangerous place to be a trade unionist in the world, is Colombia. Another trade unionist was just killed the other day. These trade agreements are not ways to improve workers' rights. The food safety is mentioned. Right now, the FDA inspects 1% to 2% of imported food. 85% of our seafood is imported to the United States. Vietnam, Vietnam is the 5th largest exporter of shrimp to the United States. Hundreds of shipments have been put aside by the FDA. With the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that volume of exports to the United States of seafood and other types of food will increase. The ability of the FDA to inspect those will decrease. And also there are provisions in the Trans-Pacific Partnership that will actually erode our food safety standards. Drugs, AARP, Doctors Without Borders have all railed against the parts of the Trans-Pacific Partnership that are really in the playbook of big pharma, the big pharmaceutical companies that will extend and expand their patent monopolies so that drugs prices will stay high, the ability to produce generics will decrease, and Doctors Without Borders has stated that the Trans-Pacific Partnership is the most dangerous trade deal ever in terms of access to life-saving drugs in developing countries. Tobacco companies love the Trans-Pacific Partnership because the U.S. is pushing to basically put major obstacles in the path of governments at every level to restrict the sale of tobacco products. American Lung Association, American Heart Association, all sorts of associations representing people who are concerned about the impacts of tobacco are up in arms about this also. The intellectual property chapter has just been leaked through WikiLeaks. It shows that the U.S. is pushing an agenda of the big corporations, yet again, in terms of intellectual property rights, which would be expanded. It's a way around, if you know about SOPA and things like that, that have failed in the U.S. Congress. This is a way around to get it through this trade agreement. There are also prohibitions about agriculture, what can be done, inspections, labeling, and also, to tag it along, and where this intersects with the financial transactions tax, the Robin Hood tax, is the investment chapter basically makes it illegal for countries to have capital controls, including financial transaction taxes. If you do have it, this investment chapter has what's called an investor-state dispute resolution process. Kind of rolls off the tongue, right? But this allows corporations to sue governments before international tribunals, the UN and World Bank tribunals, totally outside our system, for any rule, law, or regulation that, and this is a term, adversely impacts their, here it goes, expected future profits. So if we have environmental laws or labor laws or food safety laws that adversely impact a corporation's expected future profits, they can sue us in these international tribunals, and we're liable for compensation for the loss of those expected future profits. This covers almost, and that actually is an affront and a challenge to our sovereignty and our democracy. It's a way corporations can get around the laws that we work so hard to get passed. So when the effort to pass a financial transactions tax, a Robin Hood tax, is successful, that will be challengeable by corporations who will take us to these UN World Bank courts as a restraint of the movement of capital. This investment chapter says that the governments cannot delay or restrict the movement of capital into and out of a country. Hundreds of economists signed letters to the President of the United States saying this is terrible. You can't confine a country or not allow a country to restrict the massive movement of capital in and out of countries. This is what led to the Asia financial crisis in the 90s. It was what metastasized the 2008 housing bubble around the world, and it's bad policy. Even the International Monetary Fund says that these capital controls are vital to repair and promote global financial stability. So the TPP, you put it all together, it's a package for disaster for working families around the world. It's great for the 1%, by the 1%, and it's secret. These negotiations are held in secret. Nothing has publicly been released, even though it had been for past trade agreements that the U.S. was participating in. You can hear this from Representative Grayson, who has direct experience with that. So we've seen what the TPP is, how it impacts our lives, what to do. Please call your member of Congress. Please call your senators and say no to the TPP. Say no to Fast Track, which is called Trade Promotion Authority, which I'm sure Representative Grayson, he'll be here later. He'll talk about at length. This, again, is a way to undermine and subvert our democracy purely for the profits of multinational corporations. And it's short-term profits, because the global financial instability that will result from agreements like this will bite us all in the end.
So what you're saying is it seems like we're being rolled in secret and our own country is leading the pack.
That's true.
I wish you didn't
So
break
why
down that
didn't
simply,
you
but-
say this before and I wouldn't have to go through the whole thing?
Well, Representative Grayson will come in here. I'm sure he'll put it out there just like that. But it's hard to believe. It sounds just impossibly unreal. But someone's got to stop it. So,
And the only way it will be stopped is from pressure from us. Because you know the campaign contributions from the big corporations have a lot of clout. We don't have the money, but we've got the voices and the calls and the bodies, of which you all are an important part of.
okay. Well, thank you very much, Ken, for giving us your insight. We know that the CWA is doing a good job of being a big voice, and we, of course, are in line with helping you with that very, very tough task. But someone's got to do it.
Just one other thing. There have recently been letters signed by 194 members of Congress opposing Fast Track and raising concerns about Fast Track and the TPP together. That's a lot, and it ranges from Republicans to Democrats and all ideological stripes in terms of our spectrum, from the left to the right and right to the left. A lot of people are mad at this. It's time for us to make sure they act on what's good for working people everywhere.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, Ken. One of the things I admire about our friend Tim, who, of course, is not in the room but is in the room, is his great ability to think quickly and sort of shift gears very quickly. And this is a forum where we do have to sort of bop back and forth and color outside the lines. And with that in mind, I want to sort of step out from our agenda to introduce quickly Laura Kearns, who's a legislative assistant with our friend over on the other side, Bernie Sanders. She'll talk to us a little bit more about one of our favorite subjects, better health care.
Hi, thank you, Tim, for inviting me, and thank you all for having me today. So I guess you guys have heard we're trying to do healthcare reform in this country, and there have maybe been some problems with the website. But states have not had problems signing people up for Medicaid, which we think is an excellent indication of why we should implement single-payer system in this country. And so I am very happy to announce that Senator Sanders is ready to reintroduce the American Health Security Act, which is his state-based single-payer bill. The companion bill is, of course, H.R. 1200, Congressman McDermott's bill here in the House. It is almost entirely the same as previous versions. We have just made a couple little changes at the suggestion mainly of Physicians for National Health Plan and some others. So everything is remaining the same except that we will be mandating or really asking that states cover everyone who is living in the state regardless of immigration status. No matter why you're here, you're probably still going to need health care. And requiring that providers and especially hospitals and such separate out their capital budgets and their operating budgets and don't pull from the operating budget to cover the capital budget. There was some discussion. It was suggested that we have a requirement in there that all providers be either public or nonprofit. We have decided not to go that route. We think that with everyone with one insurance company anyway, a single payer system, it will cut down on the opportunity for some of the actions that insurance companies like to take and that certain providers like to take to make sure that they get more money out of you. We do not yet have a definite time frame for introduction. The bill itself is totally ready to go, so we're looking at probably introducing it just so it's in the hopper, hopefully before Thanksgiving. I make no guarantees about that. But what with the senator being on the Budget Conference Committee and the Defense Authorization Act slated to come up in the Senate next week, we think that it's not going to be the best time to start talking about healthcare. The senator obviously has a lot on his plate, and this is a really important topic that he wants to devote a lot of time and attention to. And so we're hoping to do an announcement about this probably sometime during the December work period. And I would be happy to work with any and all of you who would want to participate in such an event. So please feel free to reach out. I think most of you have my contact information by now. And if not, my email is Lori, that's LORI _Kearns, KEARNS, @sanders.senate.gov. Does anyone have any questions?
Some quick questions, comments? Can you repeat the
Any
question?
thoughts about others in the Senate that might be co-sponsors and efforts to get co-sponsorship as well in the companion bill? In the past, the bills have come out and they basically have not moved anywhere because no efforts have been made, major efforts have been made to get co-sponsorship.
So the question was if there are going to be any efforts to get co-sponsors here in the House or the Senate. I know Public Citizen has been working very hard on that issue and has had productive conversations with members of Senator Rockefeller's and Senator Harkin's staff. Because I believe this would go through the HELP committee, we don't expect Senator Harkin to sign on just because he chairs that committee and such. But we hope that they would be supportive. I don't know about any other offices. Now, when Senator Warren was at Harvard, she did work with people on efforts regarding single payer and studies showing why single payer would be beneficial, and we would hope that that would continue into her tenure here in the Senate, but I have not had any conversations with her staff about this bill yet.
Well, thanks for taking the time to come out and brief us. So we're going to continue along. Thanks.
All right. Thanks so much for having us.
Okay. All right. So as we're moving along here, we're going to now bring up to the table our Social Security Works ally, Alex Lawson. You know how this works, right? You speak into the...
Yep. So first, just thanks to Tim and Connor and Steve. So as has been mentioned, With PDA's help, we actually got over 700,000 signatures on a petition with Senator Sanders that he wrote. And about a dozen organizations joined in that effort. And it's a clear line in the sand around the budget conference negotiation that Senator Sanders is a conferee of. So it's a pretty powerful statement to have a champion of ours inside the Budget Conference Committee saying absolutely no benefit cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And this comes as a part of our broader campaign to change the narrative, to change the discussion around Social Security from one of defense to offense. And I think everyone has seen that we've had great pickup in that effort. And just last week, Senator Brown joined Senator Harkin's bill to expand Social Security, bringing us up to 4 sponsors, co-sponsors in the Senate. And in the House, we're up to 40. So we're really gaining momentum there. And I think when we deliver this petition to Paul Ryan's office, hopefully everyone in the room who can will stick around because it should be pretty fun. And I know Tim is really looking forward to having a high PDA presence when we deliver those petitions. And we're going to be filming that, and we'll use, we'll put together a video, and then all of the organizations, which is Move On and Credo, Democracy for America, Progressive Change Campaign Committee, PCCC, and a bunch of Daily Kos and others, are going to continue to use that video and to increase the pressure and make sure that I think folks in this room, it's funny, I have different kind of discussion. I think folks in this room, I don't need to remind that when you're winning, you don't actually ease up. This room is very much understands that when you have momentum on your side, that's when you need to really press your advantage. And that's where I think we are on this round of budget conference discussions. But really, what we need to do is change the discussion. We need to change the narrative for next year so that we don't have to just continually have this fight. I have been working at Social Security Works since its inception. I was employee number 1, and I personally have fought this exact same fight. This is our 6th time during this administration where we've had some sort of fast-track effort to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So I think the progress is slow but steady. The strategy is sound to go from defense to offense. When you're on defense, you only need to lose once. When you're on offense, they only need to lose once. And the truth is, and I'll end with this, it's not just a strategy, it's not just a tactic, it's also the truth that we are ignoring a massive $14 trillion retirement security crisis. People right now, and the younger they are, the worse it is, do not have the ability to save for their retirement so that they can maintain their standard of living. And that's a little wonky phrase, so when we use it, I ask people to explain what that means. It means near poor folks fall into poverty. It means that middle class folks who live a long time fall into poverty. It means millions of Americans under the current system are not going to be able to retire out of poverty. And the reasons for that are simple. The private pension system has failed, not a little bit, a lot, and entirely. The only people it benefits are the extremely wealthy. 401ks work extremely well if you're rich. If you're not, they don't work at all. So this system has failed. The 401k experiment, it's over, concluded. It does not work except for the wealthy. Defined benefit pension plans, they do work. That is an actual stream of income. That's why they're disappearing at a rapid clip and will shortly be more rare than unicorns. So the only thing that is left, the rock that people can rely on, is Social Security. So increasing Social Security is really just the first step. It's not at all the end. We need to build a retirement income system so that millions of Americans aren't retiring into poverty. And I think we're making some momentum in changing that discussion, and we just need to keep the pressure up.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. And again, 3 o'clock, he's going to be going over to Mr. Ryan's office to drop off a bundle of 700,000 signatures. So thank you, Alex. All right, well, moving along. Sometimes these roundtables get a little depressing. There's so much going on that seems insurmountable. But there are a couple things that are really making some progress, and the next speaker is going to give us a little bit of insight about what's going on with the very important topic, again, the Robin Hood tax. A couple weeks ago, our good friends at the National Nurses United put on a very good conference and a lobby action. Literally, I think several hundred people were there. It was a great, inspiring day. And she's going to come up, tell us a little bit more about what happened then and on the subject in itself.
Thanks, Steve. I'm Laura McCleary with National Nurses United, and I just want to say to Tim that we miss you and are thinking about you. So I wanted to share with you all about the Robin Hood Tax Conference that was just mentioned. We had 189 participants. We did a 2-day action conference, which I think is a great model. I was really intrigued by this model. We thought we're going to do a teach-in component to it on day 1 and get everyone geared up and informed and ready to go out to the Hill on day 2. So we did basically a half day of speakers, including labor leaders and movement leaders. Jeffrey Sachs, the noted economist, spoke, and Bob Polin, another economist from UMass, who's been very instrumental in designing the economic models that are the basis for the financial transaction tax. We had a graphic recorder who made a beautiful pictorial representation of all of the discussions. We had Jim Hightower kick it off. It was a terrific day. And then on day 2, we had a congressional briefing in the morning. We heard from a number of members of Congress who are co-sponsors of the bill, and of course from Representative Ellison, who's the lead sponsor on 1579, HR 1579, our Robin Hood tax bill. And, we heard from Representative Conyers and Edwards and Barbara Lee. It was really terrific. And then we heard from some experts, a Cornell law professor who is a legal expert on the financial transaction tax, a member of the European Parliament, Annie Podimata, spoke about her leadership of the movement there, and the necessity of getting these things on both sides of the Atlantic, frankly, to make sure that investors are not given the wrong set of incentives. And also we heard from Wally Turbeville, who's a former Goldman Sachs trader, who told us about the level of irresponsibility in the market today and how the amount of high-frequency trading that goes on could really be addressed by a financial transaction tax. And then we broke and we did 95 Hill visits. With the cross-issue delegations. So we had members from environmental groups and labor organizations, housing, HIV, AIDS, student debt, all these different organizations coming together to send their grassroots leaders into offices on the Hill. And we've added Sarbanes to the list of co-sponsors, and I expect to add some more over the next few weeks. So really terrific event. If you came and you didn't turn in your lobby report, please give those to me. A little bit of housekeeping. I think looking forward, we really feel that this is a great issue because it will allow progressives in Congress to stand and fight for their values. This is about, there's sort of a starvation mentality going on around the budget conversations. There's the idea that we have to find cuts from somewhere. We have to mint new money, essentially, out of various aspects of savings to even pay for restoring some of the cuts from the sequester. And I think that is absolutely the wrong attitude. I really liked what Alex just said about the best defense being a good offense. And I think this is a form of offensive, potent medicine because we know that there is adequate money in the country to pay for our priorities. This is it's just all on Wall Street, and so this is a tiny tax that would transfer essentially 50 cents on $100 worth of trades to the things that people need. And when we run up as progressives against the hard question of how do we pay for all the things that we think we need to pay for, education, infrastructure improvement, social services, education, all of the things that we know we need to do to keep ourselves competitive and to have a society that thrives, this is really a huge pay for that's basically sitting there. And I think calling the question by continuing to raise this issue is a way to escape, sort of loosen the knot, if you will, around the kind of discussion that's going to happen between now and middle of December around where do we find cuts in the budget, what programs should be on the chopping block. That kind of thing is the trap for the Democrats. It's absolutely a trap. We need to get off defense and back on offense, and the Robin Hood tax is a great way to change the conversation in exactly that direction.
Okay, great. Quick question? We'll take
Yeah.
a couple very quick questions.
It's a tremendous event. I
Repeat the question.
attended that. But what is the ongoing work of the national nurses on the transaction tax and even educating everybody in America? Because I think this is something at the grassroots level. People out in the hinterlands would buy time and again. I know we're at PDA, we come up constantly. We're here every week almost.
Yeah, so
Repeat the gist of the question.
sure. The question was, what are we doing now to follow up on the conference? So we're aggressively going after promising Hill offices at the national level. And then at the level of our grassroots and field, we're planning a day of action with our state affiliates in December. And we'd love for other participants to take up the banner for that day. It's basically a day of calls into offices to try to continue to keep the pressure on. We're also meeting regularly with Senate members trying to get a Senate version of the bill, which we think is incredibly critical to the next sort of phase of the campaign. So,
There's one other question. Okay. You did such a great
Great,
job.
thanks.
All right, thank you very much. All right, rolling along. A number of the members are voting right now, so once they come, we'll certainly defer to them and give them the floor. In the meantime, I just want to take a real quick minute here to acknowledge some of our long-term friends who've made contributions in many different ways and who are starting to be part of what we're doing and adding to our dialogue and expertise. Joseph, for example, I understand last night was a very good IoT that had a lot of good brain power and feedback there. So thank you for that. But someone who's been with us from before day one, and who's a real friend of not only our agenda and our movement, and someone who probably just about everyone in this room knows because she's a little bit active in a lot of things. We're going to call on Medea Benjamin to honor us with a few words about some of the things that she's working on. I'm sure, in particular, right now, your drone initiatives and whatever else you feel like. So you've got the floor for a few minutes.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Medea.
So we are working on a drone summit this coming up weekend, and it's very exciting. We have about 400 people already pre-registered. It's at the Georgetown Law School. We are pretty much at capacity, but if anybody wants to come, you should still sign up. I have some flyers here. We have about 60 speakers coming from all over the world, folks coming from Yemen. We worked 2 months to get their visas and finally got visas for the first time ever for people from Yemen who have been victims of drone strikes, as well as the lawyers who've been working with them. We have folks coming from Europe who are looking at the proliferation of drones through NATO, folks doing the same thing around Latin America. It will be a very, very interesting couple of days. The first day is devoted to the teach-in, getting us all up to speed, and the second day is around organizing. So the Drone Summit is this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Prior to that, we have a press conference at the National Press Club for the Yemeni delegation on Friday. At 11 o'clock, a protest at the White House at noon, then going over to the headquarters of the main drone maker, General Atomics, at 1 o'clock. Evening, see a great new film by Robert Greenwald, Brave New Foundations, at Busboys and Poets 5th and K on Friday night. Saturday night, we are showing a Hollywood film. Hollywood has now made a new film on drones. It's kind of a well, it's an interesting take on the operators. It all takes place within the control room. And that's going to be shown, a sneak preview at the Busboys on 14th and V, and that is Saturday night. And we just got word today that Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky has gotten us a room for a hearing, a briefing on Tuesday, and that will be Tuesday from 8:30 to 10. And we would love some help from folks on getting as many congresspeople as we can. You might recall that recently a group from Pakistan came here. It was the first time ever in 10 years of using drones that Congress ever got to hear from drone strike victim families themselves. That was sponsored by Congressman Alan Grayson. And this will be the first time ever to hear from Yemenis, and Yemen is now the focal point in the drone war. We are also bringing it back home by focusing on the issue of the airspace being opened up by September 2015 to drones here in the United States. We'll have sessions on that over the weekend, and we think it's important to relate what we're doing overseas to what will be happening here at home if we don't do something about it. So, any comments, questions?
Well, thank you, Medea. Are you backing our friend Mr. Shalal?
Oh, of course. Anybody want?
Just as a very quick aside, one of our PDA board members, Andy Shalal, who many of you know as the owner of Busboys and Poets, but a man of many other talents, has officially announced his candidacy, serious candidacy for the mayoral campaign here in D.C. So those that know what Andy's done for the movement and what he's done for PDA, and who are sick and tired of hearing about the corruption in the other side of Washington, certainly look up his campaign and support him. So with that quick little aside, we're going to continue our discussion. Ms. Lee should be here in a few minutes, and Alan Grayson hopefully will be here soon after, hopefully not at the same time, because then that would cause all sorts of protocol issues, I suppose. But with that in mind, we're going to continue our conversation about how we can start changing ways we do business and start converting our economy towards more productive things. And there's someone in this room who's a very good contributor to this issue and has been in support with our agenda on this. And we will now introduce Miriam Pemberton. So if you can come up.
Yeah, so economic conversion. I just want to give a few updates from what I told you last month about the progress we're making on this front. I talked about a nascent movement to create commissions at the state level, which would have a mandate to diversify their defense-dependent economies. And I told you that Connecticut has such a commission. It is now in motion. I got some signs based on the first meeting that this might be one of those commissions that holds a lot of meetings and writes a report, and that's the end of it, you know. So I wrote a memo sort of giving some recommendations for how this commission could be more likely to come up with a plan that was actually implementable and that would actually be implemented. So one of the members of the commission has circulated it, and we'll see. There's now strong movement in the state of Maryland. I'll be meeting with the congressional co-sponsors of a bill to create a commission in Maryland next week. The Maryland State AFL-CIO passed a conversion resolution last month, and we've been organizing around this commission to support it in Maryland, and the president of the Maryland AFL-CIO is part of that coalition. This is, I'll just pass around a copy of that resolution to sort of try to give you some ideas of what might be done in other states, and I'd be happy to help with any of that. In that line, our friend organization, Women's Action for New Directions, has a women legislators lobby made up of state legislators. And so I'll be doing a webinar for them next week to try to encourage them to create commissions in their states so that to really make this a broader national movement. So I've been mentioning that in a recent PDA forum, Congressman Ellison heard about the Connecticut law and said, you know, we need to do that at the national level. And so I wrote up a bill, but now I have this longtime staffer who's done a lot of work on the Ledge Council. I'll be meeting with him so he has some ideas of how to make this thing look like more like a real bill. And then I'll be circling back with Congressman Ellison's staff and the other members of the CPC who are interested in pushing this. So we will see. I don't know. Then I've been talking about these federal planning grants actually at the Pentagon through their Office of Economic Adjustment that are available for communities and regions and states to do transition planning, to figure out a plan B to diversify their defense-dependent economies. And so in the kind of teamwork that Tim is always talking about, hello Tim, so one of the PDA members from Missouri and I had a long conversation about how they might get one of these planning processes going in the state of Missouri. So we'll see how that goes. I think last time I passed around a flyer that sort of walks through how the how-to guide of how you do this planning and how you get these grants. But I thought I would just pass those out in case anybody else who didn't get one needed one. And then finally, one more development. So PDA leader Mark Levin has been sending me notices of federal grants from the Department of Labor. They're called National Emergency Grants, and the Department of Labor is now starting to target the workers who are starting to be laid off as sequestration cuts the defense budget. And so I think these grants are another really important tool. These are for assisting workers in retraining and finding new jobs. And so I think this is, as I say, a really important additional tool for organizing and for really creating this transition to a demilitarized economy that we need. So I will keep you posted. Thanks.
Okay. Any questions for Mir? Okay.
Why, yes.
Do you have any quick thoughts on, I know you're heavily involved on the sequester and the budget process, and are we likely to sustain defense cuts as this goes forward?
I will know more. So I co-chair the Budget Priorities Working Group, which is all the NGOs in town that work on this from a variety of different perspectives. And I'll know more tomorrow after we meet, what the prognosis seems to be. Everything I've read so far suggests that despite the fact that, as we know, sequester is a terrible way to run a government, it does have this benefit of actually getting us some serious, although insufficient, cuts to the defense budget. And from what I'd like to hear what other people are reading, because I don't know that I have any more information than anybody else, but my sense, and perhaps you could speak to this too, is that nobody really can see a way that this Congress is going to come up with a plan that's going to get rid of the sequester. And so that's going to have terrible effects on so many of the things we all work on, but it's going to have one good effect, which is to create some serious cuts to the defense budget. And that's what my work is about, to try to make sure that doesn't decimate communities across the country that have become dependent on this Pentagon corporate welfare.
Thank you, Miriam. Appreciate it. Any other questions? Matt, question?
Yeah, why are defense stocks
Repeat the
at
question.
record highs?
The question is, why are stocks at record high?
Defense.
Oh, defense.
Yeah, I mean, that's a
Good
fabulous question. I'd say the contractors started favoring their profits favoring their profits and reducing their workforces, last year. And so they are, sitting pretty at this point, and, sequester is going to cut their budgets, but certainly is not going to do anything like create these doomsday scenarios that they've been talking about, and what you indicate about their current profits is Exhibit A to prove that point.
Okay.
I'm retired Navy captain. I was a Duke submariner, and absolutely these wars are against the law. We got to have a coordinated effort, and I've tried to put that in. We could easily cut the whole thing 90%. We have no enemies. Kellogg Grant is making it all outlawed, and I have a plan. I'd like to talk to you a little bit afterwards so we can do it. But we can do this. We don't need, do not need submarines. They're out illegal. Absolutely, all illegal. Thank you.
Well, that would be a nice notion, getting rid of all submarines and all warfare, too. That would be good. All right. See all these great ideas that are brewing about now. Let's just go out there and do it. All right. Well, folks, we're still waiting on members Lee and Grayson to come. They're still wrapped up in votes. So we're going to take a few minutes here, and one of our key brains behind the operations, although he'll never admit this, but Steve Cobble is with us today. So Steve will come up and take a couple minutes about some of the priorities he's working on. Of course, he won't mention anything about his work with our buddy Andy Shalal, which, by the way, we're not endorsing him because we're a national PAC, but our buddy Andy Shalal is running for mayor. It's legitimate. He's got a good chance. So, Steve? I think you'll give us a free cup of coffee at Busboys next time.
Hi, everybody. I think I'll focus on the letter drops next week, because I missed the first half hour. Have we talked about that yet?
Letter drops, yeah.
Did you talk about the environmental part, the climate change? Okay, well, maybe I won't focus on it then. But
Plenty to focus on.
the reason I wanted to bring it up is I think this typhoon in the Philippines is yet another serious warning, one of a series that nature's going to continue to give us, that we have to pay attention to this stuff. And the system that we live and work under doesn't want to. And so we're going to have to press them, and there's a very short timeline, as we all know. But our friend Tom Hartman has made videos called The Last Hours. You can see at lasthours.org. It addresses this methane question, which James Hanley probably already knew about, but the rest of us probably know less about that than we know about the carbon question. And there is severe danger from both to the atmosphere, and the heating amplifies the rate of escape into the atmosphere. And we could literally be on a shorter timeline even than we thought, which was already a crunch. Meanwhile, there are negotiators meeting in Warsaw, and their job is to do as little as possible. I suspect that the Filipino representative, who bravely said he was going to fast until they did something, is probably going to not eat for 2 weeks, and then he'll have to go home, because I doubt that they'll do anything. But I credit him for trying. And I think our letter drop is partly on this climate change issue. It deals with fracking. It deals with some of these environmental bills, none of which, of course, the House has any intent to pass. So these are markers for the future. They're organizing markers that we can take back to the public and ask people why they're not working on this issue. But I don't think there's any doubt, and I know nobody in this room disagrees, that these are really the issues we should be dealing with, because the fate of entire continents and species and It's actually probably overdramatic to say the Earth itself. It's probably just humankind, but it's a pretty big deal. And we're not being serious about it as a political system. So everything that we can do to do that, to raise that up, PDA wants to do that, and that's why we're working with Tom Hartman on these videos, and that's why we're carrying these bills. So our letter drop is partly about that next week, and I want to thank everybody out there for taking part in that. And I see somebody important just came in, so I will cede my time.
That's you, Steve. That's you.
No,
right.
I'm no Barbara Lee.
Well.
I know Barbara Lee.
Well, there's not many like Barbara Lee, right? I'd say that whether she's in the room or not. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Well, as Steve alluded, there is a very important person in the room, and this is a person who's been with PDA since, since the very beginning. She's been on our founding advisory board since the word go, and as many people know, if you're on an advisory board, it doesn't mean you necessarily you're giving advice or you're active, but that can't be said about Representative Lee. She's been very active, very much a stalwart friend and ally, particularly when PDA was just starting out. And here it is, fast forward a few years, and here we are having a monthly meeting here in the hall. It used to be when we come to the Hill, Tim, would have to really knock hard on some of these doors to get attention. Like Tim needs to work hard to get attention, but certainly didn't have to work hard to get Barbara Lee's attention, primarily because what she's been doing throughout her entire career is very much in agreement with what we're doing. So we're very lucky to have an ally and a real true activist to be part of our movement, and we will give you as much time as you need to talk to the rest of us here. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much. Let me say how good it is to see everyone. This place can be kind of interesting, but you're here, the voice of the people. And I just want to, is Tim? Hi, Tim.
Right out of the box. He's
Tim,
there. He's watching.
we miss you, Tim, but it was good seeing you 2 weeks ago. And yes, I was with Tim and several of you here in Roxbury on that very important day. And from then forward, I felt like we had an inside-outside, real progressive strategy. And I remember the first meeting. Now, it didn't take too much for Tim to break in and for PDA to break it in up here on the Hill. I can remember the very first meeting. Tim and I went to see Speaker Pelosi. And it was really an interesting, very important, historical meeting. And as a progressive, she got it right away. And so now we have really a progressive caucus of 75, 80 members, the largest caucus still here in the House, and a very active caucus. And in large part, it's a result of PDA being so active in members' districts. And I always say that the progressive agenda really is mainstream America agenda. Oftentimes, and I come from Oakland and Berkeley, and oftentimes my friends, constituents, and colleagues say, we're an island unto ourselves. We're left of center. Do we really make a difference? And I have to remind them that the rest of the country has caught up with where progressives have been for many, many years, understanding that this is about equity, it's about justice, it's about peace. It's about providing for the American dream for all, and that's all we care about, and that's what you all are doing. And so I just have to congratulate you and thank you so much. We're at a defining moment here, I think, here on the Hill in terms of the budget, in terms of sequester, in terms of global peace and security issues, and I'll just narrow in on what's happening to low income, the working poor, and the poor of our country. We see now the Farm Bill, SNAP cuts. First, they bifurcated it and took out the farm subsidy piece, $60 billion, right, going to crop insurance, and separated that from the nutrition section. Of course, we didn't support that, but they had the numbers, so they got it passed. So then they come back with a $40 billion cut to the SNAP program. The Senate, I believe, had about, $4 billion. And so now we have a conference committee. Thank God we have Congressman McGovern, co-chair, the member of the Progressive Caucus, co-chair of the Hunger Caucus, as well as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, and we have Senator Debbie Stabenow. So they're really, and I was on a call with them last week, Rosa DeLauro, myself, McGovern, Fudge, and Senator Stabenow, to try to develop our strategy, because we have said over here, no more cuts, period, ... We are, Conyers and I are leading, where, has he been here? Our chairman still, John Conyers, the effort to try to extend SNAP benefits for, we have a bill to extend it for 1 year and one to extend it for 3 years. That has nothing to do with the cuts that are taking place. This has to do with the Recovery Act, where now, as of November 1st, families are seeing a cut of about $39, I think it's $39 a month for a family of 4. That was an automatic cut as a result of what we put into the stimulus bill, because we knew that people were having a hard time during this recession, and so they needed to have this bridge over troubled waters. And I always remind people, as much as I don't like to talk about it, I was on food stamps and public assistance for many years. Didn't want to be, and most people want a job and they want to take care of their families. But you know, people go through some difficult times, and they expect their government to be there for them. And if we're not, I say it's un-American. You know, our values are such that we believe that we support the common good. The food stamp program is one of the programs with the least amount of fraud in it. You know, now they're talking about putting, well, let me finish with the automatic cuts. So anyway, so that took place as of November 1st. So we're trying to figure out how to restore those automatic cuts, and John Conyers and I have this bill to extend it. But secondly, on the $40 billion now that's pending and the $4 billion in the Senate, you have these very onerous work requirements that would change the total policy. It's not only the cuts, it's the policy that's being changed. I mean, can you imagine putting work requirements on people who need SNAP benefits when there are no jobs? You know, when the unemployment rate is still especially in communities of color, over 12%, when people who are working, it's a large percentage of people who are working, low-wage workers, are on SNAP benefits already. So what are they talking about? No funding in job training, workforce training. They won't allow us to bring up any of the president's legislation nor our legislation on job creation, yet they're putting these job requirements on SNAP recipients. It's wrong and it's crazy, and it's economically stupid. For every $1 in SNAP benefit, the economy sees $1.70, I think, in return. So if you only see it from an economic point of view, it is stupid, and it doesn't make any sense. It's mean-spirited. You know, I think what we're seeing, and we saw this during the shutdown and during the debt ceiling debate, is we have 40, 50 members who came here not to be public servants necessarily. They came here as anti-government representatives, and they want to dismantle everything. They want a free-for-all. They want Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare gone. That's their ultimate. And so they're chipping away at what government support is left. And God knows we have very little left already as a result of sequester. Next thing we got to remember is that in this budget, we've got to renew unemployment compensation. I think it's 1 million people. At least 1 million people are going to be without unemployment compensation at the end of December. Now you couple that with the cuts in SNAP, cuts in Head Start, Meals on Wheels, Section 8, no investment in jobs. I mean, you've got a country you almost don't even recognize. So PDA has a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do, and I always say it's about organizing. We got to look toward next November, and we have to really figure out an inside-outside strategy to help us, you know, do the political work that we need to do to get back to an agenda that recognizes that the majority of the American people deserve to live the American dream, just like the 1%. So I'll stop there now and just say thank you again. It's really good to see everyone here, but we know you got our backs, even though sometimes we feel like up here we're swimming upstream, which we really are, but as long as PDA is there, I love your alerts. your organizing tools, your messaging. You know, you guys are just on it, and you've helped me in so many ways get so many of my bills to the floor, or at least to a hearing. And for that, we are deeply grateful. Thank you again.
As Tim would say, teamwork. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, Tim.
Well, in the few minutes that we have left, Matt, do you want to say a few words on behalf of Mr. Grayson? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, if not, then we can take a real quick segue to the ERA work. Okay. Well, all right. While we're waiting a few more minutes for Mr. Grayson to show up, or Matt will step in his place instead, let me take a minute to acknowledge the great work of someone who's not here today, but has been very, very instrumental in the successes of where PDA is at and all her good hard work. And I can keep talking about all the great things she does, but we do have a time limit. So Andrea Miller, sorry you're not here today, but you're well represented. And Rick will talk to us about the work you've been doing with your ERA initiative. Okay, Rick?
Yes, thank you. Yes, the Equal Rights Amendment for Women is part of the three-state strategy, which is part of PDA's Civil Rights and Civil Justice platform. Andrea Miller and her group, primarily her, Tammy Simpkins, and Kathy Kalin, use the web, the internet. They meet people, they call people on the phone, and they dedicate every energy that they have to passing the Equal Rights Amendment as quickly as possible. There's a twofold strategy in the Equal Rights Amendment. One is to remove the ratification deadline for the Equal Rights Amendment in Congress. We have a bill in the House, House Joint Resolution 43 by Representative Andrews from New Jersey, which we currently have 95 co-sponsors. And in the Senate, we have Senate Joint Resolution 15, which there's currently 33 senators on this. The most recent prize was last week we got Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts, the friend of the 99%. Also the team has launched a new Facebook group and helped raise money to produce a film, Equal Means Equal, which is a tremendous film. I've watched it with Andrea, produced by Camila Lopez. Currently, it's quite interesting, even among the 75 members of the Progressive Caucus, there are 31 that have yet to sign on. And in California, which in 1972 was one of the first states to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, there are 5 that have not signed on that are part of the Progressive Caucus, and interestingly enough, 4 of these 5 are women. They are obviously the next target along with the rest of the Progressive Caucus. Things that you can do: educate yourself and others. Share and participate in calls to action. There's a call every 4th Monday of the month. And follow ERA Action on Twitter and Facebook. I've got fullest confidence, since I live with Andrea Miller, that this bill is going to pass. Any questions?
No. What gives you the sense that it will pass? Because Andrew's behind it. Very tenacious, very tenacious. All right. Thank you very much, Rick. And is David available? Okay. Oh, does anyone know where the sign-up sheet is? Here. Okay. Don't want to lose that. And make sure if you have not signed it, so we can get you credit for being here today. Okay. All right. So, Connor, do we have David or Alex? Okay. Just a reminder that Alex is going to be heading over to Congressman Ryan's office in a few minutes. So those of you who'd like to be part of that that action, that responsibility, he's out in the hallway, and you can join him after our meeting. All right. Well, folks, once again, another great monthly meeting with a whole good group of people, really talking about substantive things with our allies inside and outside. PDA is committed to continuing these conversations. Tim, we really miss you. It was a real honor to be a pinch hitter, but we need our star player back, so we expect to see you here next month. But before we say goodbye, Matt Stoller, who works with Congressman Grayson, will lend a few words.
Thank you. I know we've had some logistical problems. The congressman may be on his way.
Okay.
Hopefully he is.
He's worth waiting for, folks.
Yeah, he's. I guess I'll talk about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So there's a lot of really interesting things going on right now with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which, as you heard earlier, is NAFTA on steroids, a continuation of the kind of economic integration of the world under the reign of certain types of multinational corporations. Today, the text of the intellectual property chapter was put onto WikiLeaks, was leaked, and so there's a lot of analysis going on about that chapter. There is broad disagreement between basically the United States and every other country on a whole host of different issues, from pharmaceutical and biologic protection to copyright. I know you guys were involved in the SOPA fight, and they're trying to backdoor SOPA into the agreement. And the other big thing that happened is that you have, I think, 175 members in the House who have come out and said that they don't support fast track. The fast track legislation is a delegation of congressional authority to the executive branch that allows the executive branch to negotiate these agreements as well as hold a vote without any congressional ability to mark up these bills. There we go.
Okay. Breaking news, folks. Breaking news. So we have Congressman Grayson is in the House, and I'm sure he's had a very hectic afternoon, and we appreciate your time coming here. Okay. Mr. Grayson, nice to see you.
Thank you.
You got the floor.
All right, thanks. We're here now because we had votes, and then I had a meeting in the office that had been scheduled for earlier. Sorry I couldn't come early. I'm going to do something that is not traditional. First, I'm going to change this chair because there's something wrong with it. I have that slow feeling of collapse under me that Boehner feels just about every day.
All the time.
The other thing I want to do is open the floor for questions. Maybe we spend too much time talking and not enough time listening. And they don't have to be questions. If there's certain points that you want to make to the collective audience, to the folks who might be listening online or otherwise, then it's your turn right now. So go ahead, please.
What's the official explanation for why this TPP is secret and we're not allowed to read it?
Can you repeat that, please?
What's the official explanation for why the TPP is secret and we're not allowed to read it?
Well, the official explanation of why the TPP is secret and we're not allowed to read it, you're referring to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the trade agreement that's being, the so-called trade agreement, since it has very little to do with trade, that's being negotiated by the administration now with a dozen different countries, with a parallel effort being made with even more countries across the Atlantic, which would roughly quadruple the number of countries that have free trade access to the U.S. market. The answer is that our trade representative decided, together with other trade representatives 5 years ago, many of whom are much like our trade representative's office, captured by the people that they purport to regulate. they decided among themselves that everything would be treated as confidential within the laws of each country. So, for instance, one of the parties negotiating this deal is Vietnam. The Vietnam trade representative decided, together with the U.S. trade representative 5 years ago at the beginning of negotiations, that the drafts would be treated as confidential. The way that our trade representative has tried to implement that under U.S. law is to make the claim that the drafts are classified information, which seems like a tremendous stretch to virtually everybody who knows anything about classified information. Notwithstanding that, and obviously in an effort to keep the public, and for that matter Congress, in the dark, they've stuck to their story that these drafts are classified. To show you the extreme lengths to which they will go, for 4 years they denied members of Congress who actually have access to classified information legally. We all have clearance. They denied members of Congress access to this information even though we have clearance and can see classified information. That started to change a few months ago. I was the first member of Congress who actually pointed out to them that their position was pretty weak and that they needed to stop playing games. So I got to see it, but since they called it classified, I'm not supposed to talk about it. Or even discuss it with my own staff, because my staff doesn't have the clearance that I have. Again, you can see that this is basically a game. The trade representative has given access to this information to hundreds and hundreds of so-called advisors who are outside the trade representative's office. Roughly 80% of those advisors are corporate lobbyists. So that's the nominal reason why. The actual reason why was uncovered by Elizabeth Warren in one of her confrontations with the relevant persons in the government. She said, "Why are you doing this?" And the gist of the answer was, if people knew it was in it, they might be upset. And that's as honest as you'll ever see the trade representative's office actually be.
It'll be secret up until the moment you have to vote on it?
It'll be secret until it is finalized, and then they will reveal, like magic, the results of their years and years of labor for the benefit of massive multinational corporations and billionaires. Then we can find out exactly how they're going to screw us.
And how much has been leaked so far?
Well, a lot. I mean, it turns out that these drafts are being shared pretty liberally among the different delegations, and all it takes is one delegation to sort of crack and start to leak the information. Well, that's part of it, but WikiLeaks is relatively old information at this point. And those who are, inquiring carefully are able to find relatively up-to-date information from other delegations, not necessarily our own. And it's disturbing. I mean, it's not the thrust of your question, but it's a massive giveaway of our sovereignty to multinational corporations. Yes?
The United States is involved with other countries in, I think, fundamentally important negotiations with Iran that carry with them the possibility that we can end 34 years of disastrous relations between the two mutually developed fears, the possibility of locking down Iran's nuclear program. And we all know that negotiations take time. And there's deep concern of conversations that we hear about on the Hill in terms of the possibility of passing additional sanctions in the middle of these negotiations. And if these sanctions are passed, if you put yourself in the feet or the seat, the body of the Iranian people, the Iranian negotiators, I mean, this will be taken as an absolute insult, be taken as a way of perception that the major power in this country is trying to subvert those negotiations. And my hope is that you are not among those who are backing the additional sanctions, which could ultimately lead to a much broader proliferation of nuclear weapons in the region, including to Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Egypt, and other countries.
All right, thanks. I'll work on it. I've heard that argument, and I've heard a counter argument the counter argument is that the Iranians are motivated at this point largely by the desire to eliminate the sanctions, and that the more and tougher sanctions will make them more motivated. I can see you're shaking your head. You disagree with that argument?
It makes no sense.
I think it's difficult at this point to say who's right and who's wrong. My own feeling is somewhere in the middle. My feeling is that in the end, the Iranians are going to do whatever seems best to them. I don't think that it's necessarily the case that any other extrinsic factors will matter. If they see a pitch that they like, they'll swing at it. If they don't, then they won't. So I don't think that the fact that the sanctions may be passed in the interim will mean necessarily that there'll be some kind of collapse. The motivations are still there. The reason why the Syrians are getting rid of their chemical weapons is because they made a judgment that that's the best thing for them. And I think the same thing may be in the end true of the Iranians and their nuclear weapons. I certainly hope so.
If I could say, they don't have nuclear weapons at this point. I mean, at this point, they have some nuclear program in which they are enriching uranium to levels of 20%. Their senior leaders, both Khomeini and Khamenei, have both said that the possession and use of nuclear weapons is an abomination before God. And they come back to the NPT, which has a major flaw, but it's the international law, which is that all the non-nuclear nations who've endorsed the NPT have the right to nuclear power generation. And for us to be insulting other people in business negotiations, imagine what would happen for the United States were we in negotiations with China. And were they to move essentially humiliating kind of actions against us, I mean, don't you expect that out of own sense of self-respect that Secretary of State Kerry would simply walk away?
No, I don't expect that that's what would happen. I think that it's a mistake to construe sanctions as some kind of humiliation. That's not what they're all about. They're meant to provide a tangible motivation in order to get Iran to do something that it might not otherwise do. There is significant evidence that Iran wants to develop nuclear weapons. I understand that there's evidence to the contrary that you just cited. Frankly, it's a puzzle to many people as to why Iran would be fixated on nuclear power, given the fact that it has the 5th largest oil reserves in the entire world, and that power in general is very cheap because the oil comes out of the ground at roughly $6 a barrel in Iran. So, I mean, there are questions that need to be answered in that regard. I don't think that the Iranians will regard the passage of new sanctions as anything other than what they are, which is an effort to provide further motivation for them to relinquish a program that they don't really need, at least in the view of most people in the world. There's no particular reason or benefit why to Iran having nuclear weapons. There clearly is a danger involved. All right, someone else? Yes, go ahead from this side.
Hi there, Laura McCleary with National Nurses United. We just held a conference here a couple weeks ago on the Robin Hood tax, and we had a number of speakers and events promoting Representative Ellison's bill, the Inclusive Prosperity Act, which levies, as you know, a small financial transaction tax on Wall Street transactions to raise revenues for general needs. I wanted to ask your thoughts about the bill and, ask you to co-sponsor it.
Okay, sure. Let me respond to that. I think that any objective observer would have to conclude that Wall Street is undertaxed at this point. The financial sector in general has been accounting for roughly 1/3 of profits and 1/3 of market capitalization in the stock market in the United States for many years. That's a very high proportion, both historically and absolutely. Wall Street operations do not pay anything close to the taxes that are paid by a Microsoft or other entities that are selling goods and services that aren't subject to, let's say, manipulation. In many cases, Wall Street claims the lower capital gains rate on its earned income. I think many people here are familiar with the carried interest exception that allows people on Wall Street, certain entities on Wall Street, to be taxed on their earned income at capital gains, long-term capital gains rates rather than at ordinary income rates. Many people were shocked to see that Mitt Romney, who has essentially made a lifetime of financial manipulation of the kind that you see on Wall Street, is paying less than 15% per year in taxes, and according to at least one reliable source, close to zero for the past decade. That was Harry Reid who said that. He hasn't identified what his source was, but I think he wouldn't have said that unless he had sound information. So that sort of illustrates the general point. Now, with regard to the financial transactions tax, I've had these discussions with Keith directly. In general, I think it's bad to have a sales tax on any item as opposed to an income tax. I think that the proper way to deal with the undertaxation of Wall Street profits is to eliminate the loopholes that exist right now in the tax system for income. In general, if you tax income, it has much less of a distorting effect on growth, on employment, and so on. When we have people come to us and say, well, businesses just pass on these taxes to their customers, they say, well, how do they do that? I mean, every business that I'm aware of is a business that charges as much as they possibly can. They then spend as little as they possibly can to provide those goods or services, and then they call the difference profit, and that's what we tax. I mean, are they suddenly going to, I don't know, spend more on their labor just because they have lower taxes? Are they suddenly going to cut their prices just because they have lower taxes on income? Nobody does that. So I have a sort of as a former economist, I have a sort of a principled objection to what I regard as a principled objection to taxing the sales of any transaction, the proceeds of any transaction. This applies not just to stocks, but to real estate. I'm against real estate transfer taxes as well. And sales taxes. I'm against sales taxes as well. I think that the income tax system that we've developed over the past close to 100 years in the United States raises the revenue that is needed in order to A, pay the government's bills, and B, create a sound economy that is as productive as it can be, and that sales taxes in general are not a good idea. This, in my mind, is just another sales tax. That being said, Wall Street needs to pay its fair share of the burden of government, just like any other highly profitable entity does. You're welcome.
Well, unfortunately, we are running out of time. Thank you in the audience and those in the room to stay with us in deference to Mr. Grayson having to be delayed. But there is one last question coming from Tim Carpenter, who has asked if you'd be so kind to join us right after this meeting. Alex Lawson's from Save Social Security Works is going to be dropping off 700,000 petitions to signature petitions to your buddy Congressman Ryan's office. So Tim is asking you if you would be so kind to join us. We'd be greatly appreciated.
I'm a slave to my scheduler, but we'll check on
if you
that.
can, that'd be great. Okay. Thanks, folks, for everyone for joining us. Okay. Until next month. Hi, Tim. Hope you're well. All right. Thank you very much, folks.
Property taxes are in a different class because that is essentially a form of wealth tax, and that's not the same as a sales tax.